Imagine being led to a mountain peak on your wedding day. Not for a blessing, but to be pushed over a mountain. This is the story of Sarah, a girl pushed into a rocky grave by the people she called family. They thought the fall would silence her forever. They didn't know that the mountain was preparing her for a war they couldn't win. Some secrets are too heavy for the sky to hold. The village of OBIO was tucked away at the foot of the Great Blue Mountain. It was a place of red dust, green farms, and old traditions. For Sarah, it was a place of hard work and silent tears. Sarah was the kindest girl in the village, with eyes that held the light of the sun and a voice that could calm a crying child. But in her own home, she lived like a stranger. Sarah's mother had died many years ago. Her father, John, had married a woman named Agnes. Agnes brought her own daughter, Isadora, into the house. From that day on, the warmth left the hearth for Sarah. While Isadora wore clean clothes and ate the best portions of meat, Sarah spent her days scrubbing soot from pots and carrying heavy firewood from the bush. "Sarah, the floor is still dusty," Agnes would scream, even if the floor was spotless. "Sarah, why is the water cold?" Isadora would whine, lounging on a mat while Sarah's back ached from the trek to the stream. Sarah never complained. She believed that if she worked hard enough, one day her stepmother would love her. Her father, John, was a quiet man. He saw the way Sarah was treated, but he looked away. He feared Agnes's sharp tongue more than he loved his daughter's peace. Everything changed when a wealthy trader from the city came to the village. His name was Mr. Okafor. He was looking for a wife, a girl who was hardworking and humble. When he saw Sarah fetching water at the stream, he knew she was the one. He went to John's compound and offered a large bride price, bags of salt, fine cloth, and many cows. "She will be my wife," Mr. Okafor declared. "The wedding will be in 3 days." John was happy. Sarah felt a spark of hope. Maybe in the city she would finally be free. But in the corner of the hut, Agnes's eyes were like hot coals. She didn't want Sarah to have a life of luxury. She wanted that wealth for Isadora. "That girl does not deserve such a man," Agnes hissed to Isadora that night. "She is a servant. You are the one who should wear the gold beads and sit in the fine carriage." "But mother, the trader chose her," Isadora whispered, her voice full of jealousy. Agnes gripped her daughter's hand until it hurt. "The trader chose a girl in a veil. He has not seen her face clearly. By the time the sun rises on the wedding day, Sarah will be gone, and the mountain will have taken her secrets." The two women sat in the dark, plotting. Outside, the Great Blue Mountain loomed over the village, its peaks hidden in the clouds, cold and silent. Sarah slept on her thin mat, dreaming of a new life, unaware that her own family was preparing a grave for her among the rocks. The night of the wedding arrived, but the village was still wrapped in a deep, heavy sleep. The stars were like cold diamonds in the sky, and the air was so sharp it bit into the skin. Inside the small mud hut, Sarah was dreaming of the city. She dreamed of a house with many windows and a bed that did not smell of damp straw. Suddenly, a rough hand shook her shoulder. Sarah gasped, her eyes flying open in the dark. "Wake up, child," Agnes whispered. Her voice was strange, not sharp like usual, but soft, like a snake sliding through dry grass. "It is the morning of your joy. But there is one thing we must do before the sun sees your face." Sarah sat up, rubbing her cold arms. "Stepmother, is it time for the ceremony?" "Not yet," Agnes said, pulling a heavy wool shawl around Sarah's shoulders. In our family, a bride must receive the blessing of the mountain. We must climb to the high ledge before the first rooster crows. If the mist touches your forehead at the peak, your marriage will be blessed with many children and much gold. Sarah hesitated. The great blue mountain was a place of legends. The elders said the paths were narrow and the rocks could crumble under a footstep. Is it safe, Mother? The path is steep and the moon is setting. Isadora stepped out from the shadows of the hut, already dressed in a thick wrapper. Are you a coward, Sarah? Do you want your marriage to be cursed? I am coming with you to show you the way. Even I, who am not the bride, am willing to brave the cold for your sake. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She thought her stepsister was finally being kind to her. I am sorry, Isadora. I will go. I want my father to be proud of me. They left the compound in silence. They did not wake John. They did not light a lantern. Agnes led the way, her feet moving surely over the familiar red dirt. Behind her came Sarah, her heart thumping against her ribs like a trapped bird. Isadora walked at the back, watching Sarah's every move. As they left the village, the ground began to tilt upward. The soft dirt turned into hard grey stone. The trees grew shorter and twisted, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers in the moonlight. The wind began to howl, a low and lonely sound that echoed off the cliffs. Keep moving, Agnes urged when Sarah slipped on a loose pebble. The sun will not wait for a slow bride. They climbed higher and higher. The air became thin, making Sarah's chest ache. Below them, the lights of the village looked like tiny, dying embers. Above them, the great blue mountain reached into the black clouds, its peak hidden and silent. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps. Her wedding sandals were not made for climbing. The thin leather tore against the sharp rocks. But she pushed on. She thought of the trader, Mr. Okafor, waiting for her. She thought of the life of peace she had always wanted. We are almost there, Isadora called out, though her voice sounded cold, not encouraging. They reached a place where the path narrowed until it was only as wide as a man's foot. On one side was the solid wall of the mountain. On the other side was nothing but a drop into the dark, misty ravine. The high ledge, Agnes announced, stopping at a flat rock that hung over the edge of the world. Step forward, Sarah. Look toward the east. The blessing is waiting for you. Sarah stepped onto the ledge, her heart racing. She looked out into the vast, dark sky, waiting for the first sign of light. She did not see Agnes and Isadora exchange a look behind her. She did not see Agnes raise her strong, calloused hands. Sarah stood on the very tip of the high ledge. The wind up here was not like the wind in the village. It was a wild thing that screamed in her ears and tugged at her wedding shawl. Below her, the ravine was a mouth of shadows, so deep that she could not see the bottom. The mist swirled like thick grey smoke. Look closer, Sarah, Agnes said, her voice dropping to a low growl. Can you see the lights of the city where your rich husband lives? Can you see the gold waiting for you? Sarah leaned forward, squinting into the darkness. I see nothing but the mist, stepmother. It is so cold. My feet are slipping on the frost. Then let me help you see, Agnes hissed. Before Sarah could turn around, she felt two powerful hands slam into her back. It was not a gentle nudge. It was a shove, filled with years of hidden hatred. Sarah's feet left the solid rock. For a heartbeat, she hung in the air, her eyes wide with shock. She saw Isidora standing behind Agnes, her face twisted in a cruel, jagged smile. "Goodbye, sister," Isidora mocked. "I will wear your rings today." Sarah reached out, her fingers clawing at the empty air. She found the edge of the ledge for a split second, her nails scraping against the cold stone. But Agnes stepped forward and stomped on her fingers with a heavy boot. A cry of pure agony tore from Sarah's throat. She let go. The fall was a blur of rushing wind and jagged shadows. Sarah did not scream. The air was knocked out of her lungs as she tumbled down the steep face of the mountain. She hit a rocky outcrop, her body spinning like a leaf in a storm. She felt the sharp sting of stone cutting into her arms and the snap of a branch as she crashed through a lonely, twisted pine tree growing from the cliffside. That tree saved her life. Its branches were tough and flexible. They caught her bridal shawl, slowing her fall before snapping under her weight. Sarah landed with a heavy thud on a narrow, sloping shelf of rock halfway down the mountain. The impact knocked her unconscious instantly. She lay there, a small, broken figure in a torn white dress, while the mist crawled over her like a funeral shroud. High above, Agnes and Isidora peered over the edge. They could see nothing but the grey clouds. "She is gone," Agnes said, wiping her hands on her wrapper as if she were cleaning off dirt. "The rocks have finished her. Not even a mountain goat could survive that fall." "What if father asks?" Isidora whispered, her voice trembling slightly now that the deed was done. "We will tell him she got scared of the marriage and ran away into the forest," Agnes replied coldly. "Now come, we must get back. We have a wedding to prepare for, and you have a veil to wear." The two women turned and began their hurried descent, leaving Sarah behind in the silence of the heights. But Sarah was not dead. Deep in her chest, her heart gave a small, stubborn thud. Then another. Her fingers, bloodied and raw, twitched against the cold stone. She was alone on a ledge that no path reached, surrounded by the howling wind. But she was still breathing. The sun began to peek over the jagged teeth of the great blue mountain. It was a cold, pale sun that did not bring much warmth. On the narrow ledge, Sarah groaned. Her head throbbed like a drum, and her left arm felt as heavy as a log. She opened her eyes, but all she saw was the grey mist dancing around her. "Mother?" she whispered, her voice a thin thread. But her mother was long dead, and the woman she had called Mother for years had just tried to kill her. Sarah tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through her ribs. She looked at her wedding dress. It was no longer white. It was stained with the red of her blood and the green of mountain moss. Her fine beads were scattered like broken teeth across the cold stone. She was trapped. Above her was a wall of smooth rock she could not climb. Below her was a drop that ended in jagged boulders. "Help!" she croaked, but the wind swallowed her word. Suddenly, a sound broke through the whistling wind. It was not a bird or a leopard. It was the sound of a whistle, long and low. Then came the steady thud-thud of heavy boots hitting the stone. "Look there, Kojo," a strong voice shouted. "Is that a bundle of cloth on the shelf of size?" Sarah used all her strength to lift her uninjured arm. She waved it feebly. Two men appeared on a path about 20 feet away from her ledge. They were dressed in thick animal skins and carried long spears. These were the mountain hunters, men who lived in the high caves and traded meat for salt in the lowlands. They were rugged men with faces like weathered wood. The younger one, Kojo, gasped, "It is a girl, a bride, by the look of her rags. How did she get down there? There is no path." The older hunter, a man named Bram with a beard as white as the mountain mist, shook his head. "Only by falling, my son, and only a miracle kept her on that ledge." Bram did not hesitate. He took a long, thick rope made of braided leather from his shoulder. He tied it around a sturdy mountain shrub and lowered himself down the cliff with the grace of a mountain goat. When his boots hit Sarah's ledge, she flinched, her eyes wide with terror. "Easy, little bird," Bram said softly. His voice was like the deep rumble of the earth. "We are not the ones who hurt you. We are the ones who carry you home." He saw the bruises on her neck and the way she trembled. He saw the marks of a heavy boot on her broken fingers. Bram had seen many things in the mountains, and he knew this was no accident. He wrapped Sarah in a warm leopard skin and tied her securely to his back. With Kojo pulling from above and Bram climbing with his powerful arms, they lifted her from the ledge. They did not take her back to the village of OMIO. "If she went down there," Bram whispered to Kojo as they reached the path, "whoever pushed her would only finish the job. We take her to the high camp. We heal her there." Sarah felt the steady heat of Bram's back as he carried her toward the hidden caves. For the first time since the night began, she felt a tiny spark of safety. She closed her eyes, drifting into a deep sleep as the hunters began the long trek to their secret camp. In the village of OMIO, the sun was high and the drums were beating. But the music did not sound joyful to everyone. It sounded like a warning. John stood in front of his compound, his eyes red and his heart heavy. "How can she be gone?" he asked for the 100th time. "My Sarah, she was so happy. Why would she run away into the woods?" Agnes put a hand on his shoulder, her face twisted into a mask of fake sadness. "Oh, John, you know how young girls are. The thought of the city and a strange man scared her. She is probably hiding in a thicket, too ashamed to come home. But we cannot stop the wedding. Mr. Okafor is a powerful man. If we tell him the bride is gone, he will take back the cows and the salt. He might even burn our hut in his anger." "But what can we do?" John whispered, his head hanging low. "We have Isadora," Agnes said quickly. "She is the same height as Sarah. We will put the long, heavy lace veil over her head. We will wrap her in the bridal cloth. Mr. Okafor has only seen Sarah once at the stream. In the shadows and the excitement, he will not know the difference. Once they are in the city, he will see Isadora's beauty and forget all about the other girl." John looked at the ground. He knew this was a lie. He knew it was wrong. But he was a man who hated trouble, and Agnes was a storm he did not want to face. "Fine," he croaked, "but if he finds out—" "He won't," Isadora snapped, stepping out of the hut. She was covered from head to toe in Sarah's wedding finery. The heavy white veil hid her greedy eyes and her cold smile. "I am the bride now, and I will stay the bride." The wedding ceremony began. Mr. Okafor arrived with his men. He looked at the veiled figure and nodded. He was a man of business, and he wanted to get back to the city before the rain started. He handed over the final bags of salt and the lead ropes for the cows. "Is she ready?" Mr. Okafor asked. His voice was deep and stern.
"She is ready, and she is very shy,"
Agnes lied, pushing Isadora forward. "She has promised not to speak until she reaches her new home. It is a vow she made to the mountain." The villagers cheered, though some whispered behind their hands. They wondered why Sarah had not come out to say goodbye to her friends. But the drums, drowned out their questions. Isadora was lifted into the trader's wooden carriage. As the carriage began to roll away, Agnes watched it with a grin of triumph. She had done it. She had killed the orphan and made her own daughter a rich woman. She did not see the dark clouds gathering over the great blue mountain. She did not know that high above, in a cave filled with the smell of wood smoke and healing herbs, Sarah had just opened her eyes. High up in the hidden caves of the great blue mountain, the air smelled of dried eucalyptus and roasting meat. Sarah lay on a bed of soft furs. Her arm was bound in straight sticks and clean linen, and her fever had finally broken. Bram, the old hunter, sat by the small fire, sharpening his knife. "You are awake, little bird," Bram said without looking up. "You have been fighting the shadows for 3 days." Sarah tried to speak, but her throat felt like it was filled with mountain sand. Kojo, the younger hunter, brought her a wooden bowl of cool water and honey. She drank it greedily. "Why did you save me?" she whispered. "My own mother pushed me. My own father let me go." "The mountain does not like secrets," Bram replied, his eyes kind but grave. "And it does not like blood on its stones. We saw what happened. We saw the woman and the girl in the veil." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Today was my wedding day. Isadora is with Mr. Okafor now. She has the gold, the city, and the life I dreamed of. I have nothing but these scars." Kojo let out a short, bitter laugh. "Gold? The city? Little bird, you do not know who that man is." Sarah frowned, her heart freezing. "He is a wealthy trader. He came with salt and cows." Bram stood up and walked to the mouth of the cave, looking down at the winding road that led away from the village. "Mr. Okafor is a trader, yes, but he does not trade in cloth or spices. He is a man-stealer. He buys young women from families who are too poor or too greedy to care. He takes them far to the north, to the deep salt mines where the sun never reaches. Once a girl enters his carriage, she is never seen again." Sarah gasped, her breath catching in her bruised chest. "But Agnes sent Isadora in my place. She thought she was giving her a life of luxury." "Agnes was so blinded by her hate for you that she did not ask the right questions," Bram said. "She saw the glitter of the bride price and forgot to look at the man's eyes. Isadora is not going to a palace. She is going to a cage." Sarah sat up, ignoring the bolt of pain in her ribs. She thought of her stepsister. Isadora had been cruel. She had watched Agnes push her. She had mocked her as she fell. But the thought of anyone, even Isadora, being sold into a life of darkness made Sarah's heart ache. "I have to go back," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "I have to tell my father. I have to stop them." "You are too weak to walk, let alone run," Kojo said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Then teach me to climb the secret paths," Sarah pleaded. "The mountain took my life, but it also gave it back. I will not let another girl vanish because of a lie." Bram looked at her for a long time. He saw the fire in her eyes, a fire that was hotter than any fever. "Very well," he said. "We will help you. But first, you must eat. A girl cannot fight a man-stealer on an empty stomach." The sun was beginning to dip behind the great blue mountain, casting long, bloody shadows over the village of OMIO. In John's compound, the celebration had ended, but the air felt heavy. Agnes sat on a wooden stool, counting the coins the trader had given her. She ran her fingers over the cold metal, a greedy smile on her face. "Wealth at last," she whispered, "and that girl is food for the mountain crows." John sat near the dying fire, his head in his hands. He had been silent for days. The guilt was a stone in his stomach that he could not swallow. Suddenly, the village dogs began to bark. It wasn't the bark they gave to a stranger. It was a long, mournful howl that made the hair on Agnes's neck stand up. "Who is there?" Agnes called out, clutching her bag of coins. At the entrance of the compound, a figure appeared. The villagers, who had been resting in their doorways, stood up one by one, their mouths falling open in terror. It was a girl. She was draped in a leopard skin, her hair matted with dried mud and mountain grass. Her left arm was bound in a splint of wood, and her face was carved with deep, red scratches. But her eyes were like two bright stars shining through the dark. "Sarah?" John whispered, his voice trembling. He fell from his stool, crawling backward.
Is it your spirit come to curse us?"
"I am no spirit, Father," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, echoing off the mud walls of the huts. Agnes screamed, dropping her coins. They scattered into the dirt like silver rain. "It's a trick! You are dead! I saw you fall! No one survives the high ledge!" The villagers gasped. Agnes had just confessed. The silence that followed was sharper than a knife. Sarah stepped into the light of the fire. "The mountain did not want me, stepmother, but it told me the truth. Where is Isadora? Where is the sister who laughed while I fell?" "She has gone to the city," Agnes shrieked, her voice turning high and panicked. "She is a rich wife now. You can't take that from her." "She is not a wife," Sarah said, her voice filled with a terrible pity. "Mr. Okafor is a man-stealer. He takes girls to the salt mines in the north. He buys them like goats and treats them worse than dogs. By now, the carriage is at the crossroads of shadows. If we do not move, she will be lost forever." The village erupted in shouts. Agnes froze, her face turning a sickly grey. No, he promised. He gave me gold." "He gave you the price of your daughter's life," Sarah said. John stood up, his eyes finally clearing of the fog of his weakness. He looked at Sarah, then at the mountain, then at the woman he had married. "My daughter," he sobbed, reaching out to touch Sarah's hand. When he felt her warm skin, he let out a cry of relief. "What have I done? What have I done?" "There is no time for tears, Father," Sarah said, turning to Bram and Kojo, who stood in the shadows behind her. "The hunters know the shortcut through the devil's throat. If the men of this village have any courage left, we must ride now." John grabbed his heavy machete. The village men, shamed by Sarah's bravery, grabbed their spears. Agnes sat in the dirt, weeping over her scattered coins, but no one looked at her. The best girl in the village was back, and she was leading them into the night. The crossroads of shadows was a lonely place where the mountain road met the desert track. It was there, under the pale light of a dying moon, that Mr. Okafor's carriage had stopped to rest the horses. Inside, Isadora sat in the dark, her heavy bridal veil pushed back. Her face was streaked with tears. The city she had dreamed of was nowhere to be seen, only endless trees and the cold iron shackles she had seen Mr. Okafor hiding under his seat. "Let me out!" she had cried an hour ago. Mr. Okafor had only laughed, a sound like dry bones rattling. "You were sold for salt and cows, little bird. Silence, or I will muzzle you like a dog." Suddenly, a terrifying sound broke the silence of the woods. It was the long, low whistle of the mountain hunters. From the thickets, men erupted like shadows. At their head was John, his machete gleaming, and beside him, riding a mountain pony, was a girl the villagers thought was a ghost. "Halt!" John roared, his voice cracking with the fury of a father who had almost lost his soul. Mr. Okafor's guards reached for their weapons, but they were no match for the hunters. Bram and Kojo moved like lightning, their spears pinning the guards against the wooden carriage before a single shot could be fired. Mr. Okafor tried to whip the horses into a gallop, but Kojo leaped onto the lead horse, pulling it to a halt. Sarah slid down from her pony, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She walked to the back of the carriage and pulled open the heavy door. Isadora shrieked, cowering in the corner. "The ghost! The ghost has come for me!" "It is no ghost, Isadora," Sarah said, reaching out her good hand. "It is the sister you pushed. Give me your hand. We are going home." Isadora stared at Sarah's scarred face and her broken arm. She looked at the kindness in Sarah's eyes, a kindness she had tried to kill. She burst into loud, jagged sobs and collapsed into Sarah's arms. For the first time in their lives, they did not hold each other in hate, but in a desperate, trembling peace. They returned to Omio as the sun began to rise. The village was waiting. Agnes was still sitting in the dirt, her clothes torn and her eyes wild. When she saw Isadora step off the horse, she ran to her, but Isadora pushed her away. "You sold me, Mother," Isadora whispered, her voice hollow. "You hated Sarah so much that you threw me into the fire to reach her." The village elders did not use magic to punish Agnes. They used the law of the land. For her treachery and for the attempted murder of Sarah, Agnes was banished from the village of Omio forever. She was sent into the forest with nothing but a small bag of grain and the very coins she had counted so greedily, coins that now felt like hot lead in her pockets. John spent the rest of his days trying to earn Sarah's forgiveness. He built her a small house of her own, with many windows to let in the light. Sarah did not marry a wealthy trader or a prince. She stayed in the village and became a healer, using the herbs and secrets Bram had taught her in the cave. She was known as the Woman of the Mountain, and it was said that her touch could mend not just broken bones, but broken hearts. Isadora stayed too, working as Sarah's silent helper, carrying the water and scrubbing the pots, finally learning the weight of the work Sarah had done for years. Peace finally returned to the foot of the Great Blue Mountain. And every year, on the anniversary of her fall, Sarah would climb halfway up the mountain to the Shelf of Sighs. She would look at the mist and smile, knowing that even the deepest fall can be the start of a journey toward the truth.